Greetings, dear friends. Your support is our strength. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. This helps the growth of our channel. Write comments because feedback is very valuable to us. And now to the most relevant world news. Let's go! Trump's panel sharply criticized Volodymyr Zelensky, stating that the Ukrainian leader could face very big problems if he tries to revise the agreement on rare earth metals. Trump hints at a third presidential term. There are ways to bypass the US Constitution, he stated. Swamp exercises, NATO. The alliance's equipment once again fails in Lithuania. Zelensky prepares for elections. Kyiv plans to hold a vote after the ceasefire. Hello, friends. This is Channel 8 again with your host, Sergei Ruskik. Let's talk about the main issues. Trump warned Zelensky of big problems due to rare earth metals in Ukraine. Donald Trump sharply criticized Volodymyr Zelensky, stating that the Ukrainian leader could face huge problems if he tries to somehow revise the agreement on rare earth metals. So what is the essence of this conflict? The deal has already been agreed upon, but according to Trump, Zelensky wants to revise it. But all of this was expected. The US president believes that Kyiv is using this issue as a leverage for joining NATO, which, in his opinion, is unrealistic. He understands that he will never become a NATO member, but still tries, Trump stated. Why is this so important? Rare earth metals are critically important for the high-tech industry and the defense sector. Ukraine, however, possesses large reserves and control over them, is a strategic interest for the United States of America. If the deal falls through, it could worsen relations between Washington and Kyiv. And what next? Zelensky's response: so far, Kyiv has not officially commented on Trump's threats. And the US reaction: if Trump returns to this topic, Ukraine might face a reduction in support. Consequences for Ukraine include a complete loss of trust from Western partners and enormous economic risks. Trump gave a very clear signal to Zelensky that the negotiation game could be costly for Kyiv. Trump hints at a third presidential term. There are ways to bypass the US Constitution. Donald Trump, in an interview with NBC, shocked the political establishment by stating the possibility of running for a third presidential term, despite the direct prohibition of the 22nd Amendment to the US Constitution. The key statements from the president are the ways to do this to show that he is not joking. Many people want me to do it, Trump stated. Is he hinting at a third presidential term? There are ways to bypass the Constitution. However, the key statements from President Trump are the first. There are ways to do this mysteriously, noted Trump, refusing to disclose any details. Many people want me to do it, he referred to the support of his numerous supporters. He did not directly admit to violating the US Constitution, but implied that legal restrictions could somehow be circumvented. Why did this explode in the media space? Because the 22nd Amendment was adopted in 1951, and it clearly prohibits being elected for more than 2 terms. The historical precedent here is that even Roosevelt, who was elected 4 times, did not face such a prohibition. The reaction of lawyers to this case: experts call it an empty bluff or a test of the boundaries of the permissible system. Possible scenarios: this is the first technical option. Trump could try to govern through a proxy. President: the extraordinary status of declaring a permanent crisis to extend his presidential powers. Or a provocation, testing the loyalty of his Republican Party. And the political consequences here are such that the initial support base, which is 42% of Republicans, are ready to vote for a third term. A threat to democracy. The Washington Post writes about the so-called red line for the American constitutionalism. For now, the White House calls these statements unserious. Analysts warn that Trump is testing the limits of the system before the next elections. Now, all from the realm of curiosities. Swamp exercises. NATO, the alliance's equipment once again suffers a fiasco in Lithuania. Another very humiliating incident occurred at the Pabrade training ground in Lithuania, where within a day, 2 pieces of military equipment sank of the North Atlantic Alliance. The situation became so serious that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was personally forced to go to the scene. and the chronology of events is as follows. The first to get stuck in the marshy area and completely submerged was a NATO armored personnel carrier. The special equipment that arrived for evacuation also ended up in the quagmire. The rescue operation is still ongoing. The fate of the crews remains unknown. Experts note that this is not the first case. Recently, a similar situation occurred with American M88 Hercules vehicles. The Pobrad training ground is considered a strategically important site for deterring Russia. And the incident? This one occurred just 5 kilometers from the Belarusian border. Reaction of the parties. NATO command calls the incident supposedly technical failure. How amusing. Russian military analysts mock the combat readiness of this alliance. Local residents report increased aviation activity in the area of the training ground. And what are the consequences of this whole story? The continuation of the planned exercises is in question, and there might even be a reconsideration of the entire tactic of using heavy equipment. The blow to the name of Junata as a high-tech military force was so strong that it couldn't be worse. While rescuers try to retrieve the sunken, ill-fated equipment, a logical question arises. And if the alliance cannot handle the Lithuanian swamps, what are the prospects for its ambitious plans in Eastern Europe? Zelensky is preparing for elections. Kyiv plans to hold a vote after a ceasefire. The overdue president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has begun preparations for possible presidential elections, reports The Economist, citing sources in the Ukrainian government. According to the publication, Zelensky held a closed meeting last week, during which he instructed his team to organize a vote immediately after the ceasefire, which according to preliminary estimates could occur by the end of April. What is known about these plans of Kyiv? The election scenario is being considered against the backdrop of a possible end to the active phase of the war. The voting may take place under a ceasefire, but without a full peace agreement. The issue of voter safety and the legitimacy of the elections remains a key challenge. Why is this so important now? Because of the legitimacy of power in Ukraine, if the elections do not take place, Zelensky risks facing a domestic political crisis. The support of the West, the USA, and the European Union, they insist on democratic processes despite the war. And what about Russia's reaction? Moscow may use the elections as a pretext to accuse them of likely falsification, which apparently is what will happen. Possible obstacles to these elections. Security. How to ensure voting under the threat of shelling. Second, mobilize troops. Will the military be able to participate in these elections? Third, territories liberated by Russia. Will residents of regions not controlled by Kyiv vote? I think not. What awaits next? And next, will Zelensky publicly confirm his plans for the elections or not? And how will the opposition react, which, in principle, no longer exists? It has been completely destroyed. Will there be other candidates here? Will Ukraine be able to hold any voting if the war continues? Meanwhile, Kyiv is preparing for a possible vote. The question of whether elections will take place under wartime conditions or remains open.